Welcome to the WebIDQ's Tips, Tricks and Magic session. Here we will be discussing little tips, tricks and magic which will be helpful for the peak integration, specifically for LCKit data. If the data has not been previously uploaded to WebIDQ, open the Windows File Explorer and navigate to the folder containing the KitMS data. Select KitMS data and drop it anywhere in the WebIDQ window. It can take up to a few seconds to upload the data into the database. After the files upload, the corresponding plate run is shown here. If data was previously imported, the stored data can be accessed by clicking on Select Plate Run to load the data from the database. After loading the LC data, the first step is to define the integration windows for each metabolite. WebIDQ contains a tool for automatically determine the retention time of each metabolite. To access this tool, select a sample from the wells list. For example, here I have selected Quality Control Level 2 and then a metabolite from the metabolites list. For example, here I'm selecting alanine. And now we can see we have two options for auto peak picking. Auto peak picking for defaults and just auto peak picking. Choosing auto peak picking for defaults will set the same default retention time ranges for each sample based on the quality controls. So auto peak picking for defaults uses quality control samples as reference. And choosing auto peak picking is only for specific cases such as matrix effects or the effects or the shifts in the retention time. So we recommend to use auto peak picking for defaults if there are no shifts in the retention times or there are no matrix effects. So the first tip here is to save time, and for having assurance during defining the peak integration windows, we recommend to use auto peak picking for defaults. After choosing auto peak picking for defaults, a warning will pop up about overwriting all default retention time settings. When the automated click on continue. When the automated peak picking finishes, a purple bar next to the samples or some of the metabolites indicates that WebIDQ couldn't find a peak or has low confidence about the current peak. So the second tip here is to review these confidence indicators in the metabolites list and update any metabolite where the integration windows were incorrect or not defined at all until the purple sample indicator disappears. It is possible to define or modify the integration windows by clicking once on either side of the peak. So now we can take this as an example where we see that the confidence indicator is active. And we can see that here the no integration windows defined for this particular metabolite. So to define the integration windows, just click once on either side of the peak. It is also possible to define the integration windows for the internal standard underneath the metabolite in the same window just by clicking again on either side of the peak. These dashed lines here are the measurement specific retention time ranges. So now the time for the third tip. It is generally a good practice to quickly cycle through all the metabolites to make sure that the right integration windows defined. We can check also here another example where the confidence indicator is active. For example, this metabolite. And we can see here that the integration ranges are already defined, but still the confidence indicator is active. In this case, we would recommend to define with wider integration windows so that the confidence indicator disappears. So cycle through all the metabolites just to see that if a peak is not correctly integrated or if still the confidence indicator is active, then please define the integration windows again or check if the peak is chosen correctly or not. So after applying auto peak picking and check all the confidence indicators, if you are still uncertain, follow the respective kit user manual, specifically the peak identification section, or check the example RT data sheet to estimate the retention times for your instrument. So we will check here an example where there are multiple peaks. For this, we go back to WebIDQ and we can directly define the name of the metabolite in the search field here. So let's say ABA has multiple peaks and we define ABA here in the search field and click on apply. Now select this metabolite and we can see now that we have multiple peaks here and we are not sure whether the right peak for the ABA is chosen by automated peak picking for defaults or not. So in this case, go through the user manual and check if this example is included in the user manual or not. So in the search field, type the name of the metabolite and see if it is included. And we can see that this particular metabolite is included in the user manual, and the recommendation for the ABA peak is the highest peak, so the fourth peak from the left. If the metabolite is not included in the user manual, then we would recommend to go through the example RT Excel sheet. And here, in this case, what we need to do, we need to check the retention time of the metabolite eluting before ABA and after ABA. So for this, we go back to WebIDQ to check the metabolites for to check the retention times for these two particular metabolites eluting before and after the ABA. So we write down the name here, right? We select the metabolite and we can see that here the DOPA is eluting around 3.11 minutes. So we note down the retention time of DOPA in the Excel sheet. And then we check the peak eluting after ABA. Again, we define here the name of the metabolite in the search field. Select the metabolite and we can see that it's well integrated and it is eluting around 3.38 minutes. So we go back to the Excel sheet, we note down the retention time of this metabolite, and now by checking the metabolites eluting before and after ABA, we can estimate that ABA must be eluting around 3.34 or 3.35 minutes. Now we go again back to WebIDQ to check ABA peak. And we can see that ABA is eluting at 3.35 minutes, which we have estimated using the example RT Excel sheet. So there is a high level of confidence in this case that the right peak was chosen using the auto peak picking for defaults. So after applying auto peak picking and checking all the confidence indicators, if you're still uncertain, then we recommend here to go through the respective kit user manual or example RT data sheet. So we have already talked about tips and tricks. So I will repeat the tips, what we should implement during the peak integration. Using auto peak picking for defaults, if there are no shifts in the retention time and there are no matrix effects, then check all the confidence indicators. And the third tip was to cycle through all the metabolites to check if the right integration windows were defined or not. And the trick was, if after doing this, if you're still uncertain, then go through the respective kit user manual or use example RT data sheet. So once you have made all the adjustment, you can click apply to plate run. And these default RT windows which are plate run dependent will be replaced by the ones from the currently selected well. Click on continue. You can see that after applying to plate run, all the samples will turn blue, indicated that they are using default retention time windows. The default retention time windows are plate run specific. If you want these settings to be automatically applied to the next plate run, you can click on apply as default. So after talking about tips and tricks, now it's time to talk about magic. So we all know that retention times must be reproducible and stable within the one plate run, and chromatograms are overlaying on top of one another. In WebIDQ, it is possible to overlay all the chromatograms on top of one another just by setting this slider from 1 to all and selecting here all the samples just by pressing Ctrl A. Here we can see that now all the chromatograms are overlaying on top of one another. Maybe I can take here another example. I define the name of the metabolite and we choose here dopamine. So now you can see that these solid lines are the default retention time windows. And here, because of the shift in the retention time, the peaks are not overlaying on top of one another. It's time to show magic now. Just by activating this toggle align RD shifts, we can see that all the peaks are now overlaying on top of one another. And during the peak alignment, the integration windows from the previous view where we have seen the default integration windows are appearing at different times. So in this case, the default window of one metabolite for each well is shown because of the shifts in the retention time. So the magic here is WebIDQ can overlay all the samples on top of one another, and RD windows for the complete plate run in case of retention time shifts can be defined by clicking again on either side of the peak here, rather than defining for each well individually. And now here we can see these dashed lines are measurement specific integration windows, but due to the normalization procedure, they are appearing at the same time. So with this new feature in WebIDQ, peak integration for complete plate in case of retention time shifts or matrix effects can be performed hassle-free and is much faster and easier, which was previously very time-consuming, or it was almost impossible to define the integration windows for each well separately for all the metabolites. Once you are satisfied with all the integration windows of a plate run, click on Integrate. In this case, integration of all the peaks of a plate run is performed. After integration was completed, the corresponding indicator in the workflow guidance will turn blue. So we can see that with the first blue box, integration window is defined, and with the second blue box, that the integration is completed. The third box is for calibration, followed by validation. That's all.
Thank you for tuning in. If you like this tutorial, please give a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe this channel to receive more videos on WebIDQ. I would love to hear about your experiences or any questions you might have. Leave me a comment below. Keep experimenting, and I'll see you next time for more WebIDQ wizardry.